All right, let's talk about your field. Probably OBGYN more than any field has had like the biggest political shakeup ever because 1 minute abortion was like a constitutional right, and the next minute it was like illegal in like a bunch of states. On your, well, that doesn't, I don't think that affects where you practice, right? But what's your sense of how it's affecting practices like for residents and even just faculty around the country?
Well, it actually does play into the way that reproductive endocrinology may go because some people may attribute some meaning to what an embryo may be or what,
Mm.
what management for an ectopic or, a missed abortion should be in the setting of IVF. So yeah, there are a lot of IVF or REI doctors who are starting to become more politically active because of that. But for general OBGYN residents and residency programs everywhere, you see this huge shift in how are we going to get the residents the training that they need to be able to handle these situations. And at my residency program in California, we've actually started to take residents from a residency program in Texas because they wanted to be able to come and learn how to do D&Cs and D&Es as well. And we've been able to take about, I think, every 1 to 2 months, a new resident from their program. And we've been so happy because we take a lot of pride in our ability to train residents at our program in those skills. But you see that people are not really as interested in going to programs where they're not going to be getting that training.
Right. Now, there's statistic that surveys coming out this year as I am looking at these numbers here. More than three-quarters of residents wouldn't even apply for residency in states where you had legal consequences for providing abortion care, which makes sense to me. Like, why do you want to put it, you're going through residency. It's hard enough not to get, like sued or arrested. Let's talk a little bit about go back to the sort of wellness piece because I actually think the big sort of like line in the sand is duty hours. That's it. And I kind of feel like the only way that duty hours will ever like sort of change is probably either through like some regulation, which did not work. They tried, right?
Yeah, they still
Or
try.
yeah, they still try, and it's yeah, it doesn't work. And or through like unionization, which I think probably would work. But then you get into the whole question of like what you're talking about, which is like, are you ready at the end of 4 years? Like, I I really support the residents doing something that makes their life like less toxic. But like, where do you come down on like the unionization and like, is that going to solve the problem?
Yeah, I kind of separate those issues in my mind. Like, I think the union is one thing that like may bring like additional benefits, and then the work hours and duty hours things is separate because that tended to be like regulated by my program and the GME. But I felt like the duty hours thing just wasn't that big of an issue because we were pretty good at self-reporting our hours, and I was admin chief as a fourth year, and we really rarely had people who went over 80 hours a week. And they had the opportunity to submit their timesheet like along the way. So like if at the third week of the month, they knew that they were on the trajectory to go over hours, then we could adjust their schedule. And we very rarely had to do that. So that's good and reassuring. I think people forget that it's like over the span of 4 weeks, the average has to be 80 hours. So like even if you work 100 hours one week, as gruesome as that is, you will probably not work 80 hours throughout the course of the whole month. And it works out completely fine and you get great training. I know that there are people in other surgical subspecialties that probably do actually spend 90 hours a week at the hospital, but that just wasn't my situation.
I agree that like there's these moments where like you like get a little bit of like a piling on of hours and then it ebbs and flows. And I actually don't mind that. I think of, even now like I'll work, I'm not clinically, but I'll be working on something and it's I add up the hours and it's just insane how much time I'm spending on it because I love it and I want to do it. And it's like it's not sustainable, but in the short term it's cool. What I think I really have trouble with are these like 30-hour shifts because back in the day, like
Yeah.
these overnight calls that back in the day it was like, yeah, you were on call, meant you would sleep and they'd wake you up when they needed you. That's not of like 30-hour shifts. It's like you're lucky to get an hour of sleep and by the morning you're a zombie, right? I mean, do you think that those are really necessary?
I don't think so. I mean, even sometimes like a 28 on labor and delivery is so insane. Like, you know that you're going to go so cross-eyed if you have to do a C-section in those final hours. I think that is pushing it.
Yeah, I also push back on like the sort of continuity of care piece. I'm like, yeah, you'll get continuity of care tomorrow. They'll come back. They'll be there still. You know, like there's this idea like that you lose continuity if you actually go to sleep, and I'm like, I don't think there's much learning. Like, yeah, we have so many advantages. We have the medical chart. Like I'll sign a chart, and like a day later I will open it to see like how they do in the OR. How did that go? That is
Yeah.
continuity of care. I didn't need to stay up all night waiting for that information.
Or do it yourself, like do that surgery yourself or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
I'll take your case while you sleep, and then I'll tell you how it went, and you get the follow up, and then in reverse, like you do mine while I sleep, and then tell me how it went. Like it's fine, right? I really want to. I would love to see that go away.
Yeah, I think that would be a very meaningful shift.
I'm always interested in like what I call diplomatic relations. Like how are the specialties getting along? Like I always worry, EM, emergency medicine, like they love us, they hate us. I mean, you don't have to ask. I'm not asking how's EM in your hospital, but just in general, like how's like the other residencies? Like do you feel like you know them, you know each other, there's like a bond, or is it like just like no, we're like warring factions?
I think it's I think it depends probably on where you go. Like the place where I initially did residency in Florida, I felt like we were closer with other surgical and like subspecialty. Like I had like a lot of friends in anesthesia, and other surgical subspecialty residency programs. But I feel like there isn't as much commingling at the other program that I was at. I think it might just be based on like the structure of like the programs and like where you are rotating and like whether you're all at the same main hospital
Mm.
in terms of like, when you pick up the phone and you know you're getting a consult from the ED, I feel like that kind of perspective just kind of shifts depending on what year you are. Like I always felt so overwhelmed whenever I would get a call from the ED as an intern and it's kind of easy to either like get mad or like antagonize that other person that's on the other line of the other side of the phone. But, kind of those people become your friends throughout the years.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. You just sort of like end up having like certain people that you kind of bonded with, and you know that you can rely on them, and vice versa. They're like it's like probably the worst analogy, but like they're like war buddies. Like you've been through
Yeah.
it together, and those bonds are actually there for life. Which, ironically, it's probably the extraordinary difficulty of residency that forges those relationships in some ways.
Absolutely. And if someone that you trust is calling saying that you need to run down to the trauma bay, I'm gonna run.
Yeah, that's true. You want to have like your like speed dial of like people that you and everyone's speed dial is going to be different, right? It might be who you happen to rotate with on a certain thing, yeah. But it's fun to have those like those people, those fellow travelers across specialties. Yeah, I know who my neurology friends are. I know who my ortho pals are, OB, all that. So it's kind of fun.